Have you ever seen a creature that should not exist? Something that's supposed to be only a myth? Today I've got several stories for you featuring eyewitness accounts of creatures that simply don't make sense to what exists in our current textbooks. 8-foot-tall creatures, hybrid monsters, and cryptids that lurk just outside the comfort of civilization. Enjoy these terrifying stories and try your best not to watch after dark. Now let's begin. We used to own what is now Edwards Gardens, but before that it was our family farm from 1817 to 1955. Our family sold the property to a man who turned it into a public park. But back in the days, when we did own the land, it was legal for a person to be buried on the land they owned. And of course, our family did so, making that part of the land a legal graveyard and still owned by the Milne family to this day. Now this bit of land isn't too glamorous. It's maybe 200 square feet, don't quote me on that, and contains 4 headstones, though a few have more than one name. Over the years, we've had several headstones put up, though no bodies have been buried. On one occasion, we had to visit the land so we could rebury some bones that had been dug up by a wild animal. Recently, my great-aunt died, and in her will, she asked to have her ashes spread in the plot. Now, we asked the caretakers if they were okay with us holding a small ceremony in the plot, but for obvious reasons, we could not disrupt the visitors of the park. My family's solution was to hold the ceremony at my grandpa's land during the day and spread the ashes at night. Due to issues with the weather, the gate that opens to the plot was sealed under a mass of dirt that kept it in place. Rather than take a shovel to remove the debris, my aunt volunteered me and my cousins to hop the fence and spread the ashes. At sunset, we hopped into my grandpa's truck and we made the hour-long trek to Edward Gardens. At the time, I only had my learner's permit, so my eldest cousin, Grace, was driving the way there, and my youngest cousin, Baz, would drive back. By the time we made it to the gardens, the sun had long since set. We had to receive special permission from staff, so we could park the car after hours. Luckily, thanks to our previously mentioned affiliation with the grounds, we managed to become friends with a couple of the staff who maintain the gardens. Now I've heard stories from the staff of apparitions and odd feelings, though at the time I assumed they were only stories. But after this, let's just say more than my views on ghosts have changed. We parked right to the east of a small gardened area, and near that is a small forested hill. In a fenced-off area in those woods lies the graveyard about 30 meters away from the parking lot. As we walked through the paved area, not a word was said. Instead, we focused on the gentle sounds of the night, crickets, frogs, and a lone owl. Once we hopped the fence and came to face the graves, all those sounds stopped. I didn't even realize until Grace pointed it out, but she was right. The only sound that echoed through the woodland was that of the light babbling of the creek that rested just beyond the woods. Ideally, I'd brush this off, but I've spent enough time in the brush to know that when things grow quiet, then they've gone quiet for a reason. Immediately, I tried to move things along, but my cousin's sentimentality proved more stubborn than I imagined. I was on edge the entire 5 minutes it took to spread the ashes, reacting to every little sound and shining my flashlight in every which way to see if something was watching from just beyond the fence. As we finished the eulogy and turned to leave, it was actually Grace who took first notice of the thing, as my light was anywhere but the path home. The gate is the smallest part of the fence, so it was our natural entrance, but just beyond the gate, Grace's light landed on what could only be described as a bird man. It was ghostly pale, with black feathers lining its arms. Its legs were bent backwards and ended in hooked talons, but by far the most disturbing feature was its mouth, which resembled a beak if it was covered in flesh. Grace let out an audible gasp which caught my attention. When I saw the thing myself, I kind of froze, like a child in their bed after a nightmare. You think if you don't move it might not see you. It's a sort of primordial fear, to make yourself go unnoticed, and that was the plan until the thing began to climb the fence. After that, my mind switched from hiding to running, and I instantly went to the hole in the bottom of the fence that we weren't supposed to use because of our nice clothes. Grace went through the hole first, followed by me, and then Baz. Then we ran to the bottom of the hill, where we were met with a path that followed what was formerly called Milne's Creek. When we got there, we each knew where we had to go. We had to run back up the hill and make a right toward the gift shop if we wanted to make our way back to the car. We'd stopped for a moment to catch our breath, but found new energy once we heard the audible crunch as it once again hopped the chain-link fence. We ran up the hill and past the creek before an inhuman call bellowed from the woods behind us. It could only be described as the call of a crow, but much, much deeper and louder. Once we cleared the woods, we made a beeline for the main area, which if anything would give us a little bit of cover. The main area was comprised of 3 buildings, 2 old and 1 new. We all ran next to a house that used to belong to the family, and we stopped right next to it. We could see the car from here. I could actually see the hope in my cousin's eyes, but I could also see the hope drain out as the sound of fast-approaching footsteps echoed through the grassland. We made our final push toward the car. When we got there, we all went for the doors only to realize they were locked. As Grace desperately rummaged through her purse to find the keys, I could see the creature approaching at an alarming pace. Grace unlocked the doors, and we all practically threw ourselves into the vehicle. And just as Grace had turned the engine on, the sickening sound of a thump from the back of the car made us all scream. I looked through the back window to see the belly of that thing as it used the bike racks to anchor itself. It wasn't until we peeled out of the parking lot, going 40 over the limit, that the thing finally fell off the car. The ride home was silent. Grace just focused on driving, and Baz was looking all around, trying to see if it was following us. I was hunched up in the back. I'm not afraid to admit that I cried most of the way home. When we returned, almost everyone had gone to bed. Everyone but my mom, who had stayed up and waited for us. When she looked at us and asked what happened, we let it all out. We told her everything that went on. I couldn't tell for sure if she believed us, but she did say she did, if only to alleviate some of the stress. After that, we all passed out in the living room. I can't say for sure what I saw. Up until that day, I was certain there were no ghosts or monsters, but now as I sit typing this out, I find myself wondering what kind of force in this world could create an abomination like that. Story number 2. My name is Alan. Since I graduated high school, I've been traveling around the States, constantly moving from place to place, working side jobs occasionally to keep me afloat and to fund my journey. Eventually, I hope to go from nationwide to worldwide. Perhaps someday I'll be able to travel the world as a whole. It is my deepest dream to see all the wonders of the world on my own 2 legs. That always has been and continues to be so. As far as my current state, I've visited 15 different states of the U.S. It has been trying at times and very tiring, but I've been able to find the beauty in the totality of it all. Traveling so much, and for as long as I've been doing it, I've encountered some very strange situations, most of which I would like to label as unexplainable, or to say nothing that is under the umbrella of normal could be used to explain these strange experiences. Though I have many stories that have taken place earlier in my journey, it's an instance from a more recent time that I wish to share with you today. It was exactly a month ago, if I'm remembering correctly. I found myself in the state of New Mexico after finishing my time in Colorado. Colorado was such a beautiful place, with amazing landscapes to see and kind people to meet. There's so much to do there, outdoors exploring wise. I definitely wish to go back someday. Anyway, I'm not sure where I was at the time, which is the usual case for me, but I know I was in New Mexico. Being there, I was met with a warm sun, dirt under my shoes, and mesas, along with the small gatherings of trees surrounding me. I recognized where I was to be a small reservation in what was practically the middle of nowhere. I wandered around looking for a place to grab a bite to eat, asking folks I encountered to where that might be. Most if not all directed me to a small restaurant that advertised the famous fried bread that they sold. As I entered the place and took a seat, a young waitress handed me a menu. As I read the menu, I overheard a group of construction workers on the stools to my right arguing with whom I assumed was their boss about a cursed job they were working on. 2 of the men stormed out, leaving the boss looking infuriated at the dinner table. Then the waitress returned to take my order. I ordered some fried bread, of course, with beans, rice, and beef. I took no time at all in demolishing the meal, leaving myself well pleased with the partially full belly I now had. When the time came to pay, I noticed the construction workers had finished their meal as well. I went to the register to pay, and they followed suit. As I rummaged through my wallet, I noticed that I only had half of what I needed to pay for the food. Nervous, I knew I had to break the news to the young lady behind the register, hoping that she wouldn't call the cops on me. Before I could utter a word, the boss of the construction workers told the lady that he would be paying for my meal. I was shocked and surprised by this. He paid for my meal and his own, then pulled me to the side as the rest of the workers paid for theirs. "Thanks for that," I told him. "No problem, son. I noticed you're a bit short on cash," he said. "Are you looking for work?" he asked. I paused for a moment and asked, "What kind of work?" "Well, I need some help with some demolition and construction if you're interested. I told him I'd think about it and get back to him with my decision outside the restaurant. He shook his head and I walked outside. The offer for work was tempting, plus I had plenty of experience with construction, so ultimately I decided to take the job. I met up with him outside and relayed my decision to him. He asked me my name, I told him, and we all crawled into 2 different pickups to head to the work site. The site was out far from the town and was right next to a few separate gatherings of trees like little islands of foliage. The site was a very old home, of which held a very heavy presence. The outside was a clay-like substance, hard and brittle. As I entered, I took notice of scratch marks along the outer wall that pointed toward one of the small foliage gatherings. In the foliage, there was one large tree that was hollowed out at the base. I took note of both these things. The foreman who had paid for my meal, who was called Paul, told me that they had been working on demo all morning, but had a few guys leave because they were superstitious about the area. I told him he wouldn't have that problem with me, and we got to work. We worked for hours under the hot sun, knocking out wall by wall and cleaning up the mess we had made in the process. Dusk came, and the sun began to set. I have to say that I've never seen such a breathtaking sunset as there was in New Mexico. The whole sky bled reds and warm oranges. It was amazing. The guys finished up, and I finished cleaning up and started to head out. Paul then yelled my name, which at this point had become beyond annoying from the amount of times I'd heard someone yelling my name during the day. He paid me for my work and said if I wanted more work to come back here the next day. He took off in his truck, which left me alone at the site. Once again I felt that heavy presence from when I'd first arrived. It felt as if someone was watching me, someone who was enraged about what we had done. I brushed off the feeling and decided that I would spend the night in the hollowed-out tree I'd seen earlier. I placed my things inside and laid back inside it, using my belongings as a cushion and watching the sun finally set with my legs laying out in the open from the tree. Exhausted from the labor of the day, sleep quickly found me. I rested soundly for a while until a noise woke me up. It started as a slow and low whisper which repeated itself again and again, getting louder and louder. That's when I realized what it was. My name. Someone was calling my name. The low whispers rapidly turned to distorted shrieks. All men! All men! The distorted voice continued. I tucked my legs into my chest and pulled my knife from my bag. The shrieking went on for hours, never letting up. I prayed for protection, praying that the voice that was circling my little group of trees would stop, but it didn't. After a while, though, sleep slowly came to take me back as the distorted voice slowly began to fade into the background. A few hours later, I was awakened by the foreman. "Did you sleep here last night?" he asked. I didn't respond. I just stared at the strange elongated footprints that circled my tree and went off into the desert of New Mexico. Story number 3. First off, I'd just like to say it's fascinating how many of these types of stories come out of Colorado. But I think the reasons for that are twofold. 1. The high human population density living so close to vast wilderness areas, and 2. The percentage of that population whose hobbies and passions take them deep out into the backcountry of this beautiful wild state that is Colorado. This story happened to 2 of my best friends, C and P, out on the old Bar K Ranch where we all used to live up in Jamestown, Colorado. But don't be fooled by the name. This isn't your grandfather's cattle ranch. No, the old Bar K covers thousands of acres of rugged mountain terrain, steep rocky cliffs and jagged granite spires like citadels or sentries standing guard to either side of James Creek as it snakes its way down the unforgiving canyon. It's such a wild place. You can almost imagine the Native Americans living and hunting out here, as truly very little has changed since then. We used to have mock battles, whereupon we would try to sneak up on each other with snowballs, which probably wasn't the wisest idea after all, as we later spoke with a forest ranger, who told us that there is a rather robust mountain lion population living in that area, and that they've evolved to live in prides of sorts, similar to those of African lions. And we would see lots of tracks too, including cougar, bobcat, coyote and bear tracks, not to mention scat. Wolves have also made their way back down into northern Colorado as well, and there's a known pack not too far away from there. The town of James itself, originally called Jimstown after Jim Smith, an early pioneer, is an old gold mining town and modern home to the Mercantile Cafe, a super cool bar and restaurant that features delicious home-cooked meals and live music almost every night of the week. Dogs and roving packs of wild mountain children roam the streets, and the river flows right through a picturesque mountain park smack in the middle of town. Jamestown is about 30 minutes northwest of Boulder, and the Barquet is maybe about 7 to 10 miles west of that. But on to the story, which will be from C's perspective, then follow up with P's 2 cents. It was late one night that P and I decided to hike up the canyon from Jamestown to the property as it were, to pay our friend Jay a surprise visit. Well, we got up there and Jay was already asleep in bed with his lady, so we felt pretty foolish and started making our way back down the canyon. Only we thought we'd take a shortcut back through the cliffs. It was quite dark and we didn't have any flashlights, but there was just enough moonlight to guide our way. It was deathly quiet, and I figured there must be a big cat or maybe even a bear stalking around, but we didn't pay it much mind. The wildlife here is rather reticent, and it's typically only young cats that will attack, then run away as they're just learning to interact with the environment around them. But that's when we heard a very peculiar sound. It sounded like bones breaking, like these really loud snapping and popping sounds. I looked around but couldn't see anything, and again I figured it must be a cougar enjoying the bloody spoils of her late-night hunt. We kept going maybe another 50 yards into the central cliff section, and were discussing whether to go right or left around the central spires, when something caught my eye. There were these two yellow lights, a good 100 yards or so down the gully to the left, and at first I thought it was two hikers, or maybe four strangers out looking for us. This would be pretty random though, I thought, as although you're but a stone's throw from civilization by car, this is a truly remote and isolated location. Suddenly a sound I can only describe as a guttural roar erupted up the gully, shattering the eerie silence and shaking me to my core. I felt paralyzed with shock and fear, and I could literally feel the vibrations penetrate my body. P snapped me out of my trance, grabbing me by the back of my shirt and pulling me back up around to the right of the spires. "What the heck was that?" I whispered, shakily. "I don't know, man. We need to build a fire, fast." P was already gathering small twigs and sticks, raking his hands through the dirt, building a crude pile of leaves and small sticks and things like that. I began grabbing some larger sticks and branches, while P lit the pile with his lighter, blowing gently to stoke the small nascent flame. I was nervously checking over my shoulder, and I thought I saw something moving in the shadows, but I couldn't really tell if it was just my mind playing tricks on me. "Come on, put those sticks here like this." P began building a teepee around the still smoldering brush pile. We both began blowing on it, and before long, the fire sprung to life. Just then, we were hit with a smell that reminded me of dog scat that's been left to sit out in the sun for too long. We kept blowing on the fire, adding more and more larger sticks, anything we could find. The flames were rising higher and higher, and sap-fueled sparks were flying off into the night around us. I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand up, and I grabbed a burning branch, whipping it around, only to see these two yellow eyes glaring back at me. This thing was only about 20 yards out now, and the eyes were a solid 8 feet off the ground. It was just staring at me, but I could sense a highly evolved sense of intelligence in its gaze, that and a piercing, spiteful malice. You could almost feel the pure, unadulterated hatred emanating off of this thing. That's when I heard what sounded like a branch breaking behind us. We whipped around to see another pair of yellow eyes behind us. The two sets of eyes started moving counterclockwise around the outer rim of light cast from the now burning fire. P was frantically throwing more and more fodder on the fire, and I was low-key nervous about starting a forest fire. I was running around the fire with my makeshift torch, but the light it cast was weak at best. We heard, or rather felt, another ear-piercing roar, which almost knocked me to the ground this time, followed by a low, wolf-like growl. Then there was a deep huffing sound, before the eyes seemed to peel off into the darkness. We heard heavy bipedal footfall fading away up the mountain canyon. We continued throwing dried-out timber onto the fire, until the wee hours of the morning, when I think we may have actually dozed off. We got up and kicked a bunch of rocks and dirt onto the fire, and boy, when I tell you, we straight up sprinted down the canyon back into town where we hopped in my truck, which had coincidentally been broken into by a bear, because I was an idiot and had left a freshly caught brook trout in there. We drove our tails back down to Gold Hill. End of the encounter. On to P's 2 cents. We were obviously very curious as to just what we had encountered that night. This was back before the days of Reddit and all those YouTube horror channels, but when we did Google it, we kept seeing the same thing pop up over and over again. Dogman. The name itself sounded sort of silly to me, as it invokes an image of some sort of half-man, half-dog monstrosity, with a human face and dog ears or something like that, reminiscent of Stanley Kubrick's The Shining, if you know, you know. Whereas whatever we had encountered was clearly a true apex predator. Nothing funny about it, and ultimately we didn't even really see it. We just saw the eyes, so there's really no telling what it was. To be fair, it could have been a bear for all we knew. But there are no bears in this region that are that big and aggressive, or that have glowing yellow eyes like that. At least, not that I'm aware of anyway. These beasts or entities, whatever you want to call them, seem to be more territorial than anything, and I'm guessing that we aren't their natural prey. Though there are a staggering number of missing persons reports in the Colorado Rockies, heck, the American West in general, and there's got to be something behind it, right? Story number 4. This happened over in the southeastern part of France. It happened during my vacation, during the cold days of February. The specific place is going to stay anonymous for obvious reasons, but I can say it was a city in the mountains. My father, my brother, my cousins, and I all decided to go for a walk in the forest nearby. It was starting to get dark when we got there, so we decided to make a fire. My father sent all of us out to get wood for the fire, and back in the day I was 12 and my eldest cousin was 10. We decided to separate, and at some point I started seeing more and more dead animals. And then I found this dead fox tied up by the tail on a tree. Strange symbols were carved in the tree. I started to feel a strange feeling in my gut, like a presence. I came back to our campsite and told my father. He checked it and explained to me that it was probably a sacrifice of some sort. It was getting dark, and we all sat around the fire then. I just couldn't get that fox out of my head, so me and the group began talking about it. We were all in agreement on the fact that we could feel a very strange presence out here. That's when we began to hear the strange noises in the trees, almost like what people say Bigfoots sound like. Safe to say we got out of there. The year after that, we went again, only to wind up in the same situation as before. I went looking for wood, and then I heard a growl in the trees. After that, I began to hear branches snapping, so I bolted for it. Footsteps began to follow after me, behind me, and only when I got closer to the others did I stop hearing those footsteps. I looked back one last time, and I saw an approximately 8-foot figure going back into the shadows. That was my true story. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you for listening to another unsettling episode, and that brings us to the end. Good night. Be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Thank you.